Tell me a little bit, you run a global organization in a very fast-paced, product-driven environment. How do you train for that? How do you teach people to do that?
I think it's the feedback mechanism and closing feedback loops with customers and partners. It's an amazing thing. And I think people should spend more time on it and also mapping it out and making sure that this is a conscious process, not something that happens by accident, but the conscious effort also to gather this feedback and make sure that it's processed very well. I think support, as you mentioned, is like the eyes and ears of a company pretty much. So they are in very close contact, as you said, with customers and partners. They know about issues in a very intimate way. And their job is to inform the product organization, inform managers, also marketing, sales, customer success, and so on, about any kinds of signals that customers and partners give. Because when we said before, value is an abstract thing, it rightfully is because it is constantly evolving. If you satisfied one need of a customer, they develop more, right? So value is constantly evolving. This is why you constantly need to have your eyes and ears open. And this feedback is not something that you do once a year. You need to do it consistently, continuously. And since you asked, how do we do it in Spryker and how can it be done optimally? I think support is many contact centers, customer-facing centers. It's an interface for customers and partners to provide feedback. And customers and partners provide feedback in many different ways. They might create cases, and you need them to abstract or interpret the cases and the feedback and move them on to the next owner. They might provide them with more direct ways of providing feedback via forms or whatever, interviews. And I think whatever you do, the most important thing is that you do it consciously and it's very prominent. And partners and customers, if you ask them, where can you provide feedback, they immediately are able to point it out. They shouldn't say, I don't know. I don't know who to tell, who to contact. I think the feedback process is a little bit similar to the very classic incident management process in the sense that you have one stage where you gather via the interface that you provide the feedback. Then you have a stage where you validate that feedback, because feedback can also be overwhelming. In product organizations or management level specifically, I think you need to be careful also not to overwhelm. You need to filter things, because if we stay with the example of an eye and ears, sensory overload is also not helping, the same as sensory deprivation is not helping. You need to provide feedback in the right kind of dose and also the right kind of quality. And I think this validation step is very important. You check, is this feedback valid? Is it addressing maybe, for example, a bug? Is it addressing a feature that is consistent with our strategic direction? Then you have a step where you prioritize those things. You look around and see, okay, what kind of feedback do I get? Likely you get a lot of feedback, so you need to understand what is more important than the other things. You need to triage those things. And then I think one of the very critical steps is then assigning the right owners for that feedback. If that feedback is not addressing your support organization directly, you want to hand over that feedback. If it is a bug, for example, or a feature request, you might want to hand this over to the engineering or product department. And to be able to do this, I think you need to translate that feedback first into their language. Not always the language that customer partner will use is the same as your product or engineering organization. So then it needs to be a translation step to make sure that the message is transmitted optimally in the step as well. I think it's super important to have formalized service contracts, basically internal SLAs that you agree on with those other teams that you regularly hand feedback over to. So that basically you explain, this is how we deliver you feedback. This is what we expect in return. So basically maybe an estimation on time to resolve or time to implement that feature request, or something very simple as just explaining where feedback should be put. Should it be put into Confluence, into Jira, via email? All of those very trivial things. And I think what makes this so important to have these kind of service contracts is that it makes it very easy for you to onboard new people into that process, which reduces defect rate of this very important business process. And also it allows you to track your performance. Are we meeting the SLO service level objectives that we have in those SLAs? Yes or no? How do they develop historically? This is just for due diligence of improving your continuous improvement, pretty much. And then I think we need to close the feedback loop at one point, as we have received information on what will happen. with the feedback, with the bug report, with the feature request. And then we should really honor the time that the customer and partner put into reporting that stuff to us and
Mhm.
get back to them. Basically explain to them, this is how we processed your feedback. This is what will happen. This is potentially how you can get or how you can stay up to date on what's happening with your feedback, right? Or ultimately, this is our decision. And you might tell them that the feature will be implemented or the bug will be resolved, or you might even tell them this is not something that we're currently looking into because of that reason. Closing that feedback loop is very important, even if sometimes you cannot relay a happy message to them. I think it's still honoring and making sure that this exchange is something that is reliable and people can trust and you are taking them seriously.